Well, good evening and welcome to Nashville. I'm Alan Jackson. When President Trump took office this year, some of his sharpest advisors were saying that there might be some very strong economic growth this year, perhaps even as much as 3% by the end of the year. But when the new figures on the gross domestic product came out, the 3% had already been hit 6 months into the new administration. Well, one of those very wise presidential economic advisors is with us again tonight. Steve Moore, welcome back to our show.
Thanks, Alan, for having me.
You know, I'm all for positive thinking, but when you said 3% by the end of the year, was that something you were hoping for, or did you actually think we'd get to 3% by the end of the year, or even this much earlier?
Oh, I believe you can do it if you deregulate the economy, if you cut taxes, if you get better trade deals, if you promote American energy, all the kinds of things Trump is talking about doing. Absolutely, 3 to 3.5% growth. You know, that's our historical average. So certainly we can at least do as well as we've done in the past. It is not a moonshot to get to 3% growth. And once you do, you start bending the debt and deficit curve down.
Well, the White House says we might even get to 4% by the end of the year. Is that possible? And what would have to happen to get there?
It's possible, given how lousy the economy was under Biden. We've got a lot of catching up to do. So I think it's a bit of a stretch, but I think we can do it. And boy, if that happens, we're going to see huge increases in jobs, huge increases in tax revenues, and huge increases in the productivity of the American economy. And I'd love to see it. You know, we're moving into a new era of robotics, artificial intelligence, things that are going to supercharge the economy with productivity and wage gains. So I think it is possible.
Well, there's a widespread belief that the high interest rates are holding this country back, especially the housing industry. You know, I realize that the Fed is a sort of secret society, but what can they possibly cite to keep our rates so much higher than the rest of the world?
Well, the most important thing the Fed has to do is maintain low inflation and create a stable and strong dollar. That's why you have a monetary system. That's why you have a currency, is that it has to retain its value and it has to be a means of exchange. And so I don't want to see any more runaway inflation like we had under Biden. I think we could probably do 1 or 2 rate cuts right now. I wouldn't go too far because remember when the Fed lowered the federal funds rate back before the election, the mortgage rate went up because of inflationary expectations. So I think we've got to be very careful about this. We want to make sure we want to keep inflation that 1 to 2% range, not 5, 6, 7, or 8, 9% as we had under Joe Biden. I mean, my wife is still complaining every time I come home about the cost of groceries. So we want to make sure that prices remain stable and, you know, hopefully gas prices and grocery prices will fall.
The prices seem to go up with inflation, but they don't ever seem to come down when it cools off.
That's true. That's why you get this permanent ratcheting up effect of inflation because, you know, as you said it very well, once you hit a high inflation rate like we did under Biden, you're starting at a new plateau. And that's why, you know, things, you know, when I was growing up in the 70s, things are 8 to 10 times more expensive than they were back then.
You've moved from tariff skeptic to tariff believer, and you're in good company now. Listen to the CEO of JP Morgan's comments.
We started tariffs, we didn't know what they're going to be, and now we kind of know, and they're more moderate and thoughtful and, you know, more carefully done, and hopefully they'll help some companies export. You know, maybe some people move manufacturing back here. So, you know, so far so good.
With the tariffs being implemented now, shouldn't that begin to help the U.S. job market, especially after the latest unemployment report? It was more weak than anybody thought it would be.
Well, here's my view of this, that, you know, we had a lot of, tariff turmoil back in the first 3 or 4 months of the Trump presidency. And that did hurt the economy, no question. Remember, tariffs are taxes and they suck money out of the economy. And so I talked to a lot of manufacturers and so on who said, you know, because of the supply chain problems of not being able to get, the imports in that they needed to, you know, for their production processes, there were layoffs and things of that nature. So the tariffs I don't like. What I do like is the trade deals, because once you get those trade deals signed into law, then you've got these countries that are actually going to open up their markets to U.S. goods, and that means more jobs for Americans, more profits for American companies, and more capital flowing into the United States. So It's one of the reasons I'm so bullish on the U.S. economy right now. Trump is getting very good trade deals that are forcing other countries to stop discriminating against American products.
Well, most of the world has cut trade deals with the president, but China is predictably dragging things out. Do you think we should play hardball with them this time, or just make a deal to get it behind us?
Oh, I definitely think we should play hardball with China. China's the new Soviet Union. They're the new evil empire, and they don't play by the rules. They are incredibly aggressive and dangerous in their military buildup. I think we have to recognize that this is a real adversary. And so I think Trump's strategy is to try to trade with other countries and then isolate China, because we don't want to see the United States lose. We're not going to, but I don't want China to overtake our status as the world economic superpower. You know, that's what China wants. They want to replace the United States. They want to replace the dollar as the world reserve currency. We cannot allow that to happen.
Do you have any concern about the U.S. debt that China holds?
Well, we have too much debt, that's for sure. You know, when you're borrowing $35 trillion, that's a big problem. Foreigners buy up some of that debt. They buy a lot of it up. The best way to foil China right now, you know, you asked me about cutting interest rates. I think cutting interest rates might help. But you know what would help even more to improve the American economy is cut unnecessary government spending, which is in the trillions of dollars. And every time we reduce those government outlays and expenditures, it's less money we have to borrow from countries like China.
Well, one more tariff question before we take a break. The president floated the idea of giving everyone a tariff rebate check. Is that still in the works?
I hope not. I think it's a terrible idea. The worst thing to do is have the government pass out free money to people. It becomes like a welfare payment, and that's a terrible way to get the economy moving. Much better to cut tax rates, reduce the taxes on our businesses, on our workers, so they have incentive. Taxes are about incentives. If you cut people's taxes, you're going to give them more incentives to work, more incentives to start businesses, more incentives to invest. Giving people money, I mean, it'd be a wonderful thing if we could just write checks to people and the economy would be improved. But we know that doesn't work.
Well, Steve Moore, please stay with us for another segment. There's a lot more to discuss. And if you want to get in on this with your thoughts, you can go to ajnow.com, send me an email, and we'll try to answer in our next show. I'll be right back. I'd like to extend a personal invitation to join us for our Culture and Christianity Conference. It's September the 19th and 20th on our campus here at World Outreach Church, just outside of Nashville. We've chosen 3 specific topics to explore with a wonderful group of guests. We're going to talk about the church and our expected impact in this culture, the media and their impact in our culture, and then finally, our health, how we can be healthy in the midst of all these competing voices we're hearing. The real goal is how we take our faith and integrate it in our world so we have better lives, stronger families, and strengthen our nation. Join us for Culture and Christianity here in Murfreesboro. We're back now with Steve Moore, an economist at the Heritage Foundation and former advisor to the president. You're working on a project called Vote with Your Feet. Well, living here in Nashville, we've seen the evidence of that already. Can you explain what it's about on a national level?
Yeah, so I run a group called Unleash Prosperity with Arthur Laffer and Steve Forbes and other prominent free market economists. And so people can go to our website at Unleash Prosperity and see the work we do trying to spread good economic policy. But one of our new projects is called votewithyourfeet.net. That's votewithyourfeet.net. And what we've done is we've compiled all the data on where Americans are moving to and where they're moving from, and also how much money they're taking with them when they, in terms of their income and their assets when they leave, let's say New York and go to a state like Texas. And so what we find in this report, and by the way, go to votewithyourfeet.net and it's fun to play with. You can click on 2 states. It'll show you a big map. You could click on, say, Illinois, and then you can click on Florida, and it'll show you the moving vans that are in which direction the moving vans are moving into. And you probably know that when it comes to a blue state like Illinois and a red state like Florida, those moving vans are going south. They're going, most of them are going into Florida, not out of Florida. And so you can click on any combination of states and see which states are winning the sweepstakes and which states are losing them. The two big winner states are Florida and Texas, because they have no income tax in those states. And the loser states are Illinois and California and New York and New Jersey and Massachusetts that have raised taxes through the roof and have a very progressive governing philosophy. So, and incidentally, the Southeast is just booming now. It's not just Texas and Florida. It's also states like Alabama, it's states like the Carolinas, it's states like, even states like Arkansas and Georgia are growing very quickly, and they're sucking the capital out, and sort of almost sucking the blood out of the old northeastern states that have really lost their greatest asset, which is their people.
Well, Congressman Mike Lawler, a New York native, is genuinely worried that voting with your feet, combined with a possible election of a socialist, will mean the end of the Big Apple. Listen to what he said.
We've had enough. And these policies that we saw under Bill de Blasio and Andrew Cuomo and Kathy Hochul that have really destroyed the state. They've run the state into the ground. New York leads the nation in out-migration. We have the highest tax burden, the worst business climate. And now you add an avowed socialist into the mix who's talking about seizing the means of production, that he's against capitalism.
What do you think might happen?
So the place that is losing the most people in the United States, the state that's losing the most people, has lost 2.5 million people on net over the last 10 years, has been New York. And it's the sad, rapid decline of what was once our empire state. And of course, New York City was the empire city for America. And yet what you're seeing is, millions of people move out. They're taking their money with them. They're taking their businesses with them. And New York City, by the way, which is supposed to be the financial capital of the world with Wall Street, has the highest taxes on financial investment. It makes no sense. It'd be like if Nebraska put a big tax on growing corn. That doesn't make any sense at all. And so I do believe that if New York were to elect this socialist mayor, I think that Wall Street will be gone from New York altogether, and the new Wall Street will be in Dallas, or it will be in Tampa, or it will be in Miami, or some other city that's much more conducive to economic growth and friendly to capital.
Well, Art Laffer's a Tennessean now. The next time you visit, you're both invited to be on set.
Well, I mentioned the top two states, which were Florida and Texas, in terms of getting people to come in. By the way, Florida's imported $200 billion of capital, mostly from states like New York and California. But Tennessee is in the top four. And Tennessee, of course, has no income tax either, as you know, and that is a magnet. And so instead of raising taxes, New York should be talking about cutting them.
We had a guest on recently who made the point that eventually we're going to have to do something about the entitlement programs. But almost everyone in Congress is afraid to say so. Can any party address the entitlement bloat and still get reelected?
Well, I think so. I think Americans are fed up with the amount of borrowing that we're doing. And Social Security needs to be completely revamped. It is a ripoff for young workers. By the way, I'm not a young worker anymore. I'm an old worker, but I'm 65, and what I favor is letting young people be able to take 10% of their paycheck, and instead of sending that 10% into the Social Security system, they would be able to put that money into a 401k plan, an index fund of all the stocks, and really build up real wealth over time. If I had been able to do that when I was young, and over the last 40 years, my Social Security benefit will be $3,200 a month. I just looked up the numbers. But if I had put it into an IRA account and let the money grow, I'd be able to get a benefit of about $13,000 a month. So Social Security is a terrible deal. We're really punishing our kids by forcing them to put their money into this Ponzi scheme of Social Security. And if we could do that, just think in 1 or 2 generations, we'd eliminate the entire Social Security debt, and it would be a fully funded program.
Wow. Well, when even the legitimate cuts were made in Medicare and the recent budget bill, it was a good start, but is that nearly enough?
No, it's not. It's not nearly enough. And there's a cartoon that's going around with a big, huge oak tree, with giant branches and a huge, base of the tree, and somebody comes, it's a Republican, he cuts off a little twig from the tree. And all the liberals say, "Oh my God, it's going to die! It's going to die!" And that's what Republicans have done. With the Medicaid, they've cut a little bit of the program, and the Democrats are running around saying that everybody's going to die. Of course, we have to make very significant reforms in those programs, and that should start by getting people who aren't eligible for the program to stop getting the benefits. How about work requirements so that someone is capable of working and they want to go on the government dole? They should have to work in exchange for those benefits. I think about 80 to 90% of Americans agree with that.
Well, just one more question. These mega deals that the president's making with Japan and the EU and some of the Middle Eastern countries, when will we see the benefit of those, and will be in time to keep the Republican Party in the majority going forward?
Are you talking about the trade deals?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think, we'll see how quickly those can be implemented. Just a week or two ago, we got the deal with the European Union. That's an excellent deal. It brings hundreds of billions of dollars of new investment into the United States. It forces the Europeans to stop discriminating against American products, our dairy products, our agricultural products, our technology services, and our great manufacturing in this country. So that's going to, I think, pay big dividends. I think you'll start to see those dividends being paid by the end of the year.
Well, Steve Moore, thank you for your time again today. It's always great to see you. Let the president know we'd like to have him on our show when you see him next.
I'll get him, my friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you. In a moment, a good dose of hope. I'll be right back. Hey, I want to give you a personal invitation to join my podcast, Culture and Christianity.
For a person to think that the Bible is not political, you don't know the Bible.
We're trying to understand how to take our faith outside the walls of the church and live it out in the marketplace.
He will show you what to do, whether it's in our communities, in our country, or other places in the world.
So I brought in some friends, some people that are trying to do this.
How could anyone call themselves Christian and be pro-choice? Is beyond my comprehension.
But I think he wanted them open and in need of him every day.
We have been living through a season of unprecedented deception, propaganda, manipulation.
Everybody says, Israel is attacking schools in the Gaza Strip.
I want to be a part of seeing culture and Christianity intersect. Hope you enjoy the podcast. We are living in a turbulent world. Just about any place you put your finger on the globe, there's a conflict. We've been just a hair's breadth away from being engaged in multiple conflicts recently. It's not an easy time to be peaceful. There are loud voices saying the economy is going to crater, all sorts of dire predictions, fear broadcasted over the airwaves, and too often preachers, ministers are adding to the clutter of the noise. When President Trump first unveiled the reciprocal tariff plan back in April, the CEO of the largest financial institution in the U.S. said on Fox that recession was the likely outcome. Famous commentators on CNBC were saying the market would crash, retirement savings would significantly diminish. Now fast forward a few months and those same experts are singing a different tune. The messages are conflicting. Now just because we see fearful headlines doesn't mean we have to lead our lives dominated by fear. Some of us are world-class worriers. Some of us have actually allowed our personalities to be formed around the habit of worry. It quite literally defines us. But here's the reality, worrying doesn't help. In Matthew 6, Jesus had a comment. He said, "Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will worry about itself." The old English word for worry literally means to choke, in the way a wolf would worry a lamb when it grabbed the lamb by the throat. Worry will choke you. And Jesus said worrying about tomorrow isn't fruitful. We forfeit our peace. Here's the good news. If Jesus said we don't have to do it, we can stop. Let's make that our determination. If we'll do it, let's focus on the hopeful. It'll bring better things to our lives. I'll be back in just a moment with your emails. Thank you for spending a few minutes with us today. Just a reminder, if you ever miss an episode live, you can always go to ajnow.com. They're all archived there. Makes it easy to see them, even share them with a friend. Thanks for taking the time to send your emails. Mark from Crossville, Tennessee wrote, "Thank you for being a beacon of truth and light in this fallen world. I think it's amazing how the Lord is exposing the deception of the enemy, the lies against President Trump, and bringing vindication. I thought of Ecclesiastes 10:8, the pit the enemy has dug has fallen into it. And Galatians 6:8, be very sure whatsoever a man sows, he will also reap. Keep up the great fight." Well, Mark, I think it is remarkable to see the truth that's being told in the public square. You know, I complain frequently sometimes about God's timing. He doesn't bring the truth in the timeline, I imagine, but there's truth being told that holds the potential of bringing new freedom to all of us. Keep praying. And then Rick emailed, "God is moving. How about a segment on how 3 states, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Texas, have passed laws in the last year that if someone supplies them, the 10 Commandments are to be posted in classrooms? Your friend, Mr. Barton, is spearheading a project to supply them. Other states have bills in their legislative bodies. A few good news stories would sure be worth the time." Amen to that, Rick, and that is good news. Free speech is being restored one brick at a time. We've been a bit like the frog in the kettle. They've been limiting our free speech and our free expression of our faith for far too long, and there are some permissions being restored. Now it's going to take a courageous church to walk into this new future. Finally, Timothy commented on YouTube, "The body of Christ hasn't done a good job in standing firm on God's truth, and Satan is plotting our demise. We argue with one another instead of being a light in this dark world. But like you say, I think God is waking us up and moving the frauds out." Well, Timothy, I agree. There's no question God is moving in the earth. It's unfortunate that we have argued about secondary issues, the style of worship music or the color of the fabric on the pews in our churches, and we've failed to stand up for those fundamental biblical principles that come to us from Scripture. Fortunately, we're changing, and that is a reason for hope. I'm Alan Jackson, and you have a wonderful evening.